Okay, we're picking up in Glamour on page 229, I believe it is, and we're getting into the dissipation of the glamour for the group and world glamour. And we just talked about the act of naming, which is interesting because we're naming the individuals in the group and the glamours that we are, the glamour that is going to be dissipated. So it's similar to the dissipation of glamour for the individual. You have therefore the following preparatory stages: the act of naming, the protective formula. The protective formula is very simple. The members of the group will say in unison, "As a soul, I work in light and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work from that point. I never move." And yeah, that's pretty interesting there. Now, he doesn't say that, he doesn't discuss this for the individual glamour. So, this is meant to be done in groups. It's not, so I wouldn't deviate from that, but there are many other affirmation type phrases that that are mentioned, and we would think that if you feel the need to be protected for some reason, I don't know, maybe that's something you could use. I don't know how deep we would be going at that point, so it may not make sense. But as they say this, each person in the group makes the sign of the cross by touching the center of the forehead, the center of the chest, and each of the two eyes, thus forming the long-limbed cross of the Christ, or of divine humanity. The cross is not, as you well know, simply a Christian symbol. The other cross that we are generally familiar with is said to be the cross of matter. Oh wait, I think it says that down here. So the cross is not, as you well know, simply a Christian symbol. It is the great symbol of light and of consciousness, and signifies the vertical light and the horizontal light, the power of attraction and the power of radiation, soul life and service. The cross is now made in the Catholic churches, touching the forehead, the heart, and the two shoulders, is the sign of matter. It signifies in reality the third aspect. The cross which the group will make is the cross of Christ and of the Christ consciousness. Gradually, the cross of Christ, the cross of the risen Christ, will supersede the cross of matter and of the mother aspect. Its likeness to the swastika is obvious and will be one of the reasons for its disappearance. And then we have the preparatory stages, focusing the dual personality light of matter and of mind. Talked about that earlier. Meditation on soul contact and the recognition of soul light. Then we have the blending and fusion of the two lesser lights and of soul light. This is carried forward as a group, each member making his contribution and consciously attempting to visualize the process of blending the triple light, which each contributes into one sphere of light. Okay, very interesting. You can do that. And then the group says in unison, at a signal from the leader, the light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Om, om, om. The process of individual and group alignment and integration can now be regarded as completed, and when it is really correctly accomplished, each meeting thereafter should see a more rapid integration and fusion and a greater brilliance of the sphere of light thus created. The sounding of Om indicates both the fusion and the sphere of action, because Om is first of all sounded forth by the group soul, the realized unity of the souls of all the group members, and then as the soul upon the mental plane, and finally as the soul ready to function as light bearer and distributor of light upon the astral plane. These are all symbolic ways of registering the inner reality and are an attempt to externalize force, for that is what all symbols and symbolic ways of acting are capable of doing. They thus serve to keep the workers at a point of tension. This is an important recognition and should keep the workers from attributing undue power to the form aspect of the simple ritual and aid them in focusing their attention in the world of meaning and subjective spiritual activity. These three stages are called: 1, the act of naming; 2, the act of protection; and 3, the act of focusing the light. Let me just give me a second here. It will be apparent to you that much depends upon the ability of the group members to visualize clearly as well as to think clearly. Practice naturally tends to perfect both processes. Right, sure. At the close of these three stages, the group members are united as souls, insulated against the attractive power of the glamour, and united as souls with mind and brain held steady and positive in the light. Their blended light is looked upon by them as a great searchlight whose beams are to be directed through an act of the will downward from the mental plane on to the glamour existing on the astral plane, and which has been brought into relation with the group by the very act of naming it. I guess that's very interesting. And, you could say energy follows thought again. And just a simple act of naming something brings it into relation. That's what it's alluding to there. And then even in a group, this is very powerful. I'm going into detail on this matter because the work is a new venture and I am anxious for you to start it with a clear understanding as to how the task is to be carried out. At the close of this instruction, you will find the 2 long and 2 short formulas so that they can be seen and grasped apart from their explanatory context. This initial work should take 15 minutes at first and later not more than 5, excluding the 10 minutes of silent preparation which precedes the formal work, for the group members will get used to working together and will eventually attain the objectives of the preparatory work with great rapidity. We have the technique or formula, and 5, then together and in vocal unison, the group says, radiance, we are, and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. As they say this, the group visualizes the turning of the great searchlight which they have jointly created by their unified light onto the glamour to be dissipated, holding the light steady and realizing mentally the work of dissipation it is intended to do. This is called the act of direction. Then follows a pause for a few minutes in which the group attempts to throw behind the searchlight their united, directed, and dynamic will or intent. This carries along the projected beam of light the destructive quality of the spiritual will, destructive to all that hinders the manifestation of divinity. This is done by attaining a united point of tension and the dedication of the individual and group will to the will of God. This is called the act of will, and is carried on by each member of the group silently and with a deep realization that all are thus accepted and that it is the group will which is being silently focused. Then together they say, quote, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. Then comes the act of projection and the saying of the words of power, which again, naming the particular glamour, which is the subject of attention, and thus bringing it consciously into relation with the focused light, begins the task of dissipation. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of blank. And it's named again. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour from affecting men. The power of our united light destroys the life behind the glamour. These words are very nearly the same as those in the individual formula and gain strength from the experience of the aspirant and from his familiarity with their use. This constitutes an act of affirmation, which is the second part of the act of projection. Then comes an important aspect of the work in which the group members visualize the gradual dissipation and dispersal of the glamour by the penetration of the light into its darkness. They endeavor to see it disintegrating and the reality emerging, doing this by an effort of the creative imagination. Each will do this in his own way and according to his understanding and capacity. This is the act of penetration. And this is, an interesting and imaginative part here. This is where we're visualizing the gradual dissipation and dispersal of the glamour by the penetration of the light into its darkness. They endeavor to see it disintegrating and the reality emerging. Doing this by an effort of the creative imagination. Yeah, this is really pretty cool. Now follows 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose while the group waits for the work instituted to go forward. Then follows the group withdrawal of its consciousness from the astral plane and the world of glamour. The group members refocus their attention first of all on the mental plane and then on the soul, relinquishing all thought of the glamour, knowing that the work has been successfully carried forward. They reorganize themselves as a group in relation to the kingdom of souls and to each other. Occultly speaking, the searchlight of the soul is shut off. This is the act of withdrawal. The Om is then sounded in group formation, and then in order to emphasize that the group work is ended, each member of the group sounds the Om alone, saying, so let it be, and help me in my own life to end all glamour and untruth. It will take aspirants some time to gain facility in this work, but it is surely obvious that in learning what is an entirely new technique of service, each step must be mastered and practiced for quite a long time. Every new branch of learning takes some time to become familiar, and this one is no exception, but the effort is well worthwhile, both from the individual angle and as an act of service to humanity. That all the groups may learn to function in the light and that glamour may disappear from all your lives so that you may walk freely in that light and use that light for others is the wish of my heart for you. And I think we're doing this again right now, but this is important. We're going to keep going. So the formula for the dissipation of glamour for the individual preparatory stages: 1, recognition of the glamour to be dissipated. This involves a willingness to cooperate with the soul understanding the nature of the particular glamour, and an understanding of the nature of the particular. 2, the 3 stages of focusing. Focusing the dual light of matter and mind and the mental body, focusing through meditation, this dual light and the light of the soul, and then focusing these 3 lights, and so creating the searchlight for the dissipation of glamour. We're creating that searchlight. 3, preparedness through alignment and integration. This is the production of a field of magnetic thought substance. For the turning of the attention and of the searchlight of the mind onto the astral plane. And the formula, the soul breathes out the Om into the waiting personality, and the light and power thus generated are retained for use. An intense light is slowly and consciously generated. The spiritual will is invoked whilst the mind is held steady in the light. The glamour to be dissipated and the searchlight of the mind are brought into relationship. The searchlight is then turned on by an act of the will, and a strong beam of light is projected into the glamour. The glamour is named, and the aspirant says with tension inaudibly, the power of the light prevents the appearance of the glamour, blank. The power of the light negates the quality of the glamour from affecting me. The power of the light destroys the life behind the glamour. The power of the light destroys life behind. The power of the light negates the quality of the glamour from affecting me. So there's protection in this as well. And then the Om is sounded by the aspirant, producing an act of penetration. This produces impact, penetration, and dissipation. That's really wild. There's something to this. So that we wait for the Om, and we receive that power. And then that power is then sounded again in the Om to penetrate this. The aspirant, having done his work, withdraws himself consciously onto the mental plane, and the beam of light fades out. Brief form of the individual form. Here's a brief form of the individual formula. The 4 preparatory stages. Recognition of the glamour to be dissipated. Focusing of the dual light of the personality, meditation, recognition of the soul light, unification of the 3 lights, then the process of alignment and of recognized integration, the turning of the searchlight of the mind to the astral plane, and then there's the formula, soul activity, and the retention of the triple light, the generating and visualizing of the searchlight, the evocation of the will behind the searchlight of the mind. The searchlight of the mind is turned upon the glamour directed by thought, the naming of the glamour and the triple affirmation, and the act of penetration, and then the process of withdrawing. And, it would be good to probably print these out. And I wouldn't even this brief individual formula might work later, but for somebody like me, I need to print out the full. I would need to print out the full instructions, at least for a good while, I imagine. And then we have the formula for the dissipation of world glamour for the group on the preparatory stages, and it's going to sound a lot of the same, but it's important that we read all these and get them out. So that's why we do this. We want all this information out in the consciousness, and as many times as it can be, so it can be potentially familiar at some point, if that's a thing. So the naming of the group members followed by 10 minutes of silence, and we have the protective formula the group members say in unison: as a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. As these words are uttered, each group member makes the sign of the cross of divinity. Remember, not the cross of matter, but the cross of the Christ. The three preparatory stages, focusing the dual light of matter and mind. Meditation on soul contact and recognition of soul light, the fusion of the two lesser lights with the soul light. And on a signal from the leader, the group says, together the light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. And then we repeat Om 3 times, and then begins the formula. Together the group says, radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. As these words are said, the group members visualize the great searchlight they have created, turning its light upon the astral plane. A pause follows, and then comes the invocation of the spiritual will. When this has been done, the group says, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. The glamour to be dissipated is named, and the light is thrown upon it. The words of power are uttered. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of blank. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour from affecting man. The power of our united light destroys the life behind the glamour. May we have visualization of the light penetrating into the glamour and producing its weakening and dissipation. 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose whilst the work is seen proceeding. Then the group members refocus themselves upon the mental plane, turning their attention away from the astral plane. The searchlight of the soul is shut off. The sounding of the Om individually and aloud by each member. And then we have the brief form of the group formula here. The act of naming, protection, focusing the light, direction, invoking the will, projection and affirmation, penetration, and the act of withdrawal. Our consideration of glamour is now nearing its close. We have carried a consecutive theme steadily and have traced the threefold aspect of the world illusion as it appears upon the mental plane, and their conditions the intelligentsia of the world. And their conditions the intelligentsia of the world. So this illusion that appears on the mental plane is what is conditioning the higher, those with high intellect. As it appears upon the astral plane, where it constitutes the glamour to which the masses of men succumb. We shall now consider the world of Maya, in which we physically live and move and have our being. Oh, this is, I've seen this before, and this is very interesting. I wonder if those who read my words appreciate the importance of this entire subject, or if they are aware of the wide field of service which it opens up, making practical as it does all human living, and incarnating likewise the steps whereby reality can be known and all veiling forms disappear. Behind these words of illusion, glamour, and Maya lies truth. This truth is the clear consciousness of being, of existence, and of essential initial reality. Yes, please. That is the reason that Christ stood mute before Pilate, who symbolized the human intellect. He knew that no reply could convey meaning to that veiled, inhibited mind. And that's a lot of times why we hold our peace too, right? I'm just saying, I'm just to relate it a little bit. Illusion is the mode whereby limited understand, and let me just say so that takes a lot of patience and learning and getting comfortable in all these things for us. Not that we have that the mind of Christ, but even still, it's not all that easy keeping cool all the time. And I don't mean it like that because it becomes natural, but it takes some getting used to. That's all I mean. Illusion is the mode whereby limited understanding and material knowledge interpret truth, veiling and hiding it behind a cloud of thought forms. Illusion is the mode whereby limited understanding and material knowledge interpret truth, veiling and hiding it behind a cloud of thought forms. Those thought forms become then more real than the truth they veil, and consequently control man's approach to reality. Through illusion, he becomes aware of the apparatus of thought, of its activity, expressed in thought form building, the activities expressed in thought form building, and of that which he succeeds in constructing, and which he views as the creation of his intellect. He has, however, created a barrier between himself and that which is, and until he has exhausted the resources of his intellect, or has deliberately refused to utilize it, his divine intuition cannot function. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It is the intuition which reveals true being and which induces a state of spiritual perception. Then the technique of the presence becomes an established habit, which we talked about earlier in the book. Until he has exhausted the resources of his intellect or has deliberately refused to utilize it, his divine intuition cannot function. Glamour, in its turn, veils and hides the truth behind the fogs and mists of feeling and emotional reaction. It is of unique and terrible potency owing to the strength of human nature to identify itself with the astral nature and to the vital nature of consciousness and sentient response itself. As you know and have been taught, glamour can only be dissipated by the inflow of clear, directed light. This is true of the life of the individual or of humanity as a whole. Illumination reveals, first of all, the existence of glamour. It provides the distressing contrasts with which all true aspirants wrestle. And then gradually it floods the life to such an extent that eventually glamour completely vanishes. Men see things then as they are, a facade hiding the good, the beautiful, and the true. The opposites are then resolved, and consciousness is superseded by a condition of realization, a realization of being for which we have no adequate term. The technique of light becomes a permanent condition. Wow, okay, yeah, very good. super consciousness is the opposites are then resolved, and consciousness is superseded by a condition of realization, a realization of being for which we have no adequate term. Very nice. Very good. Okay. Well, we're going to call it there for today. And then we will get into the technique of indifference tomorrow. And we're getting very close to finishing this book. And it's almost time to start thinking about what we're going to get into next. So, yeah, this is all good stuff. We don't want to miss any of it, even if we don't necessarily have a group and we're not doing these things actively right now. It's still important, I believe, to hear these things and read these things and absorb them so that it is familiar to us in a sense, right? And we've heard this before. It's nothing new. It's not going to be, it's not a surprise. This is all, we know that this can be done now, and we know how it's done. So this, I feel like it's still important to read every word of these books. All right. Well, very good. Have a good day, and we will see you soon. All right.